Did you know that the youngest king in Israel's history started his reign at just 8 years old? Yep, 8. While most kids that age are still figuring out how to tie their shoes, Josiah took the throne of Judah, surrounded by intrigue, idolatry, and corruption. But what he did with that power is what'll really blow your mind. He didn't follow the dark path of his predecessors. Instead, he became one of the most respected and devoted leaders in biblical history. Just think about it, leading an entire nation when you barely understand the world around you. Josiah could have easily fallen into mistakes, but he chose a rare path. He sought God with all his heart. What makes this story even more fascinating is that, during the restoration of the temple, he stumbled upon a discovery that would change the destiny of his people forever. Yep, one single discovery that not only transformed his life, but also the life of an entire nation. Why is Josiah's story still so relevant today? Because it proves that no matter your age, your past, or the chaos around you, when you choose to align your life with the right values, extraordinary things can happen. You're about to dive into a journey full of twists, courage, and unshakable faith. And by the end of it, you'll see how Josiah's lessons can transform your own life. Josiah was just 8 years old when he was crowned king of Judah. Let that sink in for a moment. A kid, still figuring out life, suddenly thrown into the responsibility of leading an entire nation. It was a dark time, filled with idolatry and moral chaos, a mess left behind by the kings who came before him. But despite being surrounded by so much negativity, Josiah didn't follow in their footsteps. He chose a completely different path. And here's the amazing part. When you trust God and seek the right direction, even the most unlikely circumstances can turn into something remarkable. Honestly, how many of us, even as adults, wouldn't freeze up in the face of such a huge responsibility? Even at such a young age, Josiah had something special that set him apart. A heart focused on God. He could have easily been consumed by the luxuries of power or fallen into the bad influences that surrounded the throne. But no, he decided to aim higher. You know that one decision that changes everything? That choice that shifts the entire trajectory of your life? That's exactly what Josiah did. He looked up to David, a king who walked with God, and used his example as his compass. It's like saying, I don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. I can carve out a new future. For most people, taking the throne at such a young age would have been an unbearable burden. But Josiah saw it as an opportunity to bring change. How often do we face challenges that seem too big to handle? Josiah's story shows us that with courage and faith, even the toughest situations can be transformed. If you're facing something right now that feels overwhelming, remember Josiah. Maybe the solution lies in seeking a new direction, just like he did by leaning on faith and divine wisdom. And let's talk about the contrast between his age and his wisdom. How inspiring is that? To think that someone so young could hold on to their faith in such a hostile environment. It's proof that it's not about age or experience, but the attitude we choose to take in life. If an 8-year-old boy could stand firm, what's stopping us? Sometimes we underestimate the power of those small, daily choices we make. Josiah's story reminds us that intentional decisions have the power to shape our destiny. But there was something else that made Josiah stand out. Vision. He understood that he needed to bring his people back to God's ways, even if it meant breaking with wrong traditions. Isn't it funny how, in times of crisis, the most unlikely people often become the agents of change? Have you ever thought that maybe the challenges you're facing are preparing you for something bigger? Josiah didn't know what the future held, but he was willing to take the first step. Looking at Josiah's story, it's impossible not to reflect on how our circumstances don't define who we are. He was born into a corrupted lineage, but that didn't shape his character. Too often we use our circumstances as excuses to avoid change. Oh, but my family's always been this way, or that's just how I am. Josiah proves that doesn't have to be true. We can break cycles, redefine patterns, and write a new story. And so, little by little, the young king began to craft his own legacy. He didn't know yet what was ahead, but it was clear that something big was about to unfold. His journey was just getting started, and the choices he made now would impact not just his life, but the destiny of an entire nation. And it was in this moment that something extraordinary happened. In the middle of the temple restoration, something extraordinary happened. The high priest found the book of the law. Just picture it. While workers were clearing out rubble and restoring what had been forgotten, there it was, a spiritual treasure buried under generations of neglect. When the book was brought to Josiah and its words were read aloud, something deep inside him shifted. You know that moment when you realize everything needs to change? That's exactly what Josiah was feeling. He didn't just listen to the words, he let them shape his actions. Josiah's reaction was one of deep brokenness. He tore his robes in a sign of repentance, an uncommon gesture for a king. This wasn't just humility, it was the mark of a heart genuinely willing to hear God's voice. How often are we faced with hard truths and choose to ignore them? Josiah shows us that true greatness comes from owning up to our mistakes and taking steps to fix them. It's not easy, but it's what leads to transformation. Maybe if you pause today to listen to the law of your life, you'd realize it's time for a realignment too. But Josiah didn't stop there. He sought guidance. He sent messengers to consult the prophetess Huldah, proving that even a king needs wise counsel. This teaches us something invaluable. No matter how high up you are, there's always someone who can teach you something. Whether it's a mentor, a friend, or even a book like the Bible, we all need outside wisdom to see inside ourselves. Who have you been listening to lately? Sometimes, the answer you're searching for is in the place you least expect. The discovery of the Book of the Law was like finding a map to a lost land. It brought clarity about what needed to be done, and Josiah treated it as the foundation for the reforms to come. It makes me wonder, what maps might be hidden in your life? Maybe it's something you read years ago and forgot about, or advice you brushed aside. Digging up those truths could be the first step to realigning your path. Just like Josiah, you only need to be willing to rediscover them, and what an impact it had on the kingdom. The book wasn't just kept to himself, its words were shared with the people. Josiah understood that this wasn't just about his own transformation, it was about collective change. In the same way, your actions can influence those around you. When you start aligning your life with solid principles, people will notice, and eventually they'll be inspired to do the same. The real power of that moment was how it connected the present to the past. The Book of the Law wasn't just a set of rules, it was a reminder of God's covenant with His people. It's so easy to get caught up in the chaos of daily life and forget the bigger picture. But moments like these pull us back. It's like flipping through an old photo album and remembering who you were before everything got so complicated. Sometimes, we need those moments of reflection to find our way again. And so, with the Book of the Law in hand, Josiah began planning his next steps. He knew what lay ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to realign Judah with God's teachings. The rediscovery of that book wasn't just a historical event, it was the start of a journey that would leave a lasting mark on the entire nation. After discovering the Book of the Law, Josiah realized that knowing the truth wasn't enough. You've got to act on it. He kicked off a revolutionary movement, starting with the eradication of all idolatry in the kingdom. Picture this: pagan altars, statues of strange gods, and profane rituals being completely wiped out. It wasn't some small task. Josiah faced resistance from all sides, but he knew the people's hearts needed rescuing. It's kind of like when you realize toxic habits have taken over your life, and you decide to cut them out for good. But Josiah didn't stop at destruction. He took it a step further by centralizing worship in Jerusalem, bringing the people together around the one true God. This wasn't just about logistics. It was a powerful symbol of spiritual and national unity. When faith is scattered, a nation becomes vulnerable. Josiah got that and made the temple the centerpiece of worship. Think about your own life. What's fragmented and needs pulling together? Maybe it's your priorities, your faith, or even your relationships. Josiah shows us that focusing on what truly matters can change everything. One of the most unforgettable moments was the reinstatement of Passover, celebrated with a grandeur never seen before. This wasn't just another religious event. It was a call for the people to remember who they were and the God they belonged to. There's a powerful lesson in that for us today. When's the last time you celebrated something that really matters? It doesn't have to be a big party. It could be a moment of gratitude or a meaningful gesture to remind yourself of what you value. Josiah teaches us that reflecting on our roots strengthens our sense of identity. The impact of Josiah's reforms wasn't just spiritual, it touched every part of life in Judah. As the people abandoned idolatry, their lives began to align with the principles of the law. This brought a renewed sense of purpose and community. It's like decluttering your home and suddenly feeling the space become lighter and more productive. The same thing happens in our lives when we get rid of what doesn't serve us and focus on the essentials. Josiah proved that external changes start with internal transformation. Of course, these reforms didn't come without sacrifices. There were those who resisted, clinging to the comfort of the old ways instead of embracing the challenge of the new. But Josiah didn't back down. He understood that the journey of faith and change demands courage. Maybe you faced something similar, wanting to change but running into pushback from those around you. Josiah shows us that staying true to God often means going against the flow. And the reward? A life more aligned with divine purpose. And let's not forget Josiah's leadership. He didn't just tell people what to do, he led by example. The people saw a man fully committed to living out what he preached. That kind of leadership is rare and powerful. In our own lives, we're all leaders in some capacity, whether it's in our families, at work, or in our communities. The way we act influences others more than we realize. Like Josiah, we can lead by example and inspire those around us to aim for something greater. Josiah's reforms were a turning point in Judah's history. He knew these changes were just the beginning, and the road ahead would be tough. But looking at everything he'd already accomplished, it was clear something extraordinary was unfolding. He had laid the groundwork for what came next, something that would forever change the people's relationship with God. With the decline of the Assyrian Empire, Josiah saw a golden opportunity to expand Judah's influence. But it wasn't just about land. It was about restoring the dignity and identity of a people who had been divided and oppressed. He began reaching into the lands of the former kingdom of Israel, temporarily reuniting what was once a single nation. Just imagine the impact of that move. It was like a leader who didn't just rule, but inspired an entire nation to believe in something greater. This expansion wasn't just political, it was spiritual too. Josiah didn't want to simply take over territories. He wanted to restore those places to the worship of the one true God. Pagan altars in those lands were torn down, and the law was proclaimed, unifying the people under the same principles. Think about it. Josiah wasn't just focused on the present, he was thinking about future generations. How often do we face challenges and only focus on the here and now? Josiah teaches us to take the long view, to plant seeds that will grow even after we're gone. Josiah's vision was broad, yet practical. He knew a strong nation needed solid foundations, and that meant both political and spiritual stability. By centralizing worship and expanding the borders, he was building a legacy that would outlast him. In our own lives, this can translate to how we invest in our families, our work, or our communities. What are we doing today that will positively impact those who come after us? Josiah challenges us to think beyond the moment. And what about the hope he brought to the people? In a time of uncertainty, Josiah became a beacon of inspiration. He showed that even in the face of adversity, rebuilding and thriving were possible. That's a powerful lesson. Maybe you're in a season where everything feels like it's falling apart, but Josiah's story reminds us that with faith and determination, we can rebuild our lands, whether they're emotional, financial, or spiritual. What's more, Josiah understood that true leadership is about service. He wasn't just out to expand his power, he wanted to restore the well-being of his people. That approach makes us reflect. How are we using our influence, no matter how small? Whether at home, at work, or among friends, there's always a way to lead with purpose. Josiah shows us that real power lies in serving, not controlling. Josiah's expansion also served as a call for unity. He knew that for progress to happen, the people needed to be aligned with clear goals and values. In today's world, where divisions are so common, that lesson couldn't be more relevant. What can you do to promote unity in your own circles? Maybe it's as simple as listening to someone or helping resolve a conflict. Small acts can create big ripples. And so, as Josiah expanded Judah's borders and strengthened the nation, he was setting the stage for the next chapter of his story. He knew there was still so much to be done, and that every step, no matter how small, was shaping something extraordinary. But like every journey, Josiah's path would also bring unexpected challenges. Josiah's story, so full of achievements and faith, reached a turning point when he faced Pharaoh Necho in battle. Despite God's warnings, Josiah chose to march against Egypt, perhaps driven by a sense of duty or the desire to protect his nation. The battle at Megiddo turned into a tragic milestone. Josiah was critically wounded and died shortly after. It's fascinating and heartbreaking to think about how someone so guided by God could fall in such a moment. But like all great stories, there's something to learn even in the tragedy. Josiah's death was a devastating blow to Judah. The king who had restored faith and united the people was now gone. Yet his influence lingered. He had planted seeds that would continue to grow long after his time. It makes you wonder, what seeds are we planting today? Like Josiah, we might not see the immediate results of our actions, but that doesn't mean they won't leave a lasting impact. The lesson here is simple: do good, even without guarantees of the outcome. The days following Josiah's death were dark. The people, who had experienced a spiritual revival under his leadership, began to drift again. It's a sobering reminder of how easily we lose our way when a strong leader isn't present. Still, Josiah's reforms left a mark. During the Babylonian exile, the faith he rekindled kept the people grounded. It teaches us that our actions can become guiding lights, even in the toughest times. And what about Josiah's spiritual legacy? His devotion to God became an example for future kings, even though many didn't follow in his footsteps. He showed that it's possible to lead with integrity, even in the midst of chaos and corruption. For us, it's a call to be examples, even when it feels like no one's watching. His life challenges us to stay true to what we believe, no matter the circumstances. Josiah's impact wasn't just spiritual, it was cultural too. He brought the people back to their roots, reminding them of their identity as God's chosen nation. Even during the times of exile and dispersion, that identity remained. In today's world, where so many voices compete for our attention, it's vital to remember who we are and what we stand for. Josiah shows us that when we're grounded in our values, we can weather any storm. The tragedy of his death also prompts us to think about the importance of listening to God's voice. Even the greatest leaders can make mistakes when they act on their own instincts. It's a powerful reminder that dependence on God needs to be constant. How many times do we ignore clear signs because we think we know better? Josiah's story teaches us that humility and obedience are crucial, even for those who have accomplished so much. And so, Josiah's story comes to an end, but his impact remains. He left behind a legacy that shaped Judah's history and provided a spiritual foundation during its darkest times. His life, marked by highs and lows, reminds us that even the shortest journeys can have eternal significance. And what comes after Josiah? The story continues, filled with challenges and new lessons waiting to be uncovered. Josiah's story is a powerful testament to how courage, faith, and decisive actions can change the course of a nation, and maybe even yours. He teaches us that it's never too early or too late to choose what's right, to break destructive cycles, and to align our lives with greater purposes. But now the real question is, what are you going to do with everything you've just learned? Are you going to keep living on autopilot, or will you start your own journey of transformation? Take a look around. What in your life needs reform? Maybe it's your habits, your relationships, or even your faith. Just like Josiah started by cleaning out the temple, why not begin by clearing out the altars in your own life, getting rid of anything that's holding you back? And remember, just as he sought God to guide his steps, you can do the same today. It's simple, but it's powerful. The Bible is a great place to start. Take a few moments out of your day to reflect on its lessons. Now, I want to challenge you to act. Don't let these reflections just sit in your mind. What's one thing you can do today to make an impact on your life and the lives of those around you? Start small, but start. And don't forget, this journey doesn't stop here. There's more amazing content waiting for you on the channel, so take a moment to check out the videos popping up on your screen right now. Oh, and before you go, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It helps spread these messages to more people and keeps you in the loop for everything that's coming next. See you in the next video, and remember, big changes start with small steps. God bless.